Zerasia is a land of countless nations and races, all bound together by the power of magic. Every person is born with mana flowing naturally through their body, allowing magical arts to flourish in every corner of society. Crystals known as magicite can store this energy, making them the foundation of human civilization. But their value has also plunged Zerasia's nations into one savage conflict after another, scattering the continent with fallen kingdoms and the bodies of the dead. Deep beneath the Policia Empire's cathedral, a forgotten prisoner wastes away in the dark. The young man screams as an enormous machine rips mana from his body, and his eye-patched tormentor cheerfully thanks him for keeping the struggling empire alive. The jailer calls him a magical prodigy, jerking his head back by the hair to enjoy his despair. To Policia, the captive is no prince and hardly even a person. He is merely a living mana generator. The insult makes the exhausted prisoner shake with barely contained fury, and Yoel Mainu curses the empire that destroyed his homeland and murdered his parents. His protest is cut short by heavy footsteps and the arrival of a towering armored man. The newcomer looks down at the chained prince with a presence as cold and merciless as steel. Emperor Veld Policia claims Yoel himself brought ruin upon Mainu. Only his limitless mana has any worth. For a moment, the emperor's twisted reasoning leaves Yoel speechless. In Veld's eyes, the prince's very existence was a disaster waiting to happen. The jailer delights in the accusation, repeating the word calamity as another cruel taunt. Bound to the extraction device, Yoel begins to think death would be kinder than this endless torment. Then Veld casually brings up his younger sister, and resignation instantly turns to terror. Yoel bellows that the emperor must never touch Noelle, only to learn that her life will be spared solely as long as he continues to cooperate. He calls desperately after Veld, but the emperor leaves without granting him another glance. With a pleased smile, the eye-patched jailer reaches for the machine's controls. A brutal current of blue energy surges through Yoel, wrenching him off the floor as the apparatus begins draining him once more. Through the pain, he swears they can take all the mana they want, but they will never earn his forgiveness. Someday, Yoel vows he will kill Veld Policia with his own hands. Only days before the invasion, Mainu's royal family had shared a peaceful breakfast in the south. Queen Felicia asked Yoel to put away his book before his sister departed for school. He obeyed without complaint and set the thick green volume aside, as his mother wondered how often Noel would be able to visit from distant Safar Academy. King Cayenne still struggled to accept that his 10-year-old daughter was leaving to study abroad. Then Noelle Mainu rushed in, radiant with excitement in her brand new academy uniform. Both parents showered her with praise, remarking that their little princess was growing as lovely as her mother. Noelle turned to her brother and caught him reading the same book of heroic legends yet again. Its story said that a mysterious gateway appeared whenever a truly great hero died. Yoel explained that Avalon's Gate was home to legendary warriors like Sir Halberd and Lady Faye. He called Noelle a brat for teasing him, though she quickly pointed out that he behaved no better. Still craving her brother's approval, she twirled in place and asked how she looked. Yoel abandoned the joke and declared her the cutest little sister in the entire world. Delighted, Noelle hurried to Felicia, who urged the family to eat before the carriage arrived. Cayenne was already sniffling at the thought of her departure, much to his wife's amusement. Noelle reassured them that no amount of distance could ever diminish her love for her family. Outside the castle, she hugged her mother goodbye and was warned not to neglect her health or studies. Yoel promised to rescue her from any danger, while Cayenne reminded her that her own talent had earned this chance. Noelle agreed to believe in herself and face whatever awaited her at the academy. She bowed to all three of them, thanking her family for granting what she called a selfish wish. Then she waved from the departing carriage until the castle gates disappeared behind her. That very night, a sinister darkness descended over Manu's royal castle. Yoel awoke to violent commotion raging beyond his chamber. Outside, flames had swallowed the capital, turning its once quiet streets into a nightmare of screams and collapsing homes. Without even changing his clothes, he sprinted through the corridors in search of his family. Surrounded by frightened servants and armed guards, he demanded an explanation from his father. Cayenne revealed the impossible truth. Their ally Policia had invaded, with Veld himself leading the attack. The news stopped Yoel in his tracks while enemy forces shook the palace walls. The king ordered his son to flee with Felicia while he remained behind to defend the castle. Even with defeat approaching, Cayenne would not abandon the duty he owed his people. Yoel could only think of the civilians still trapped in the burning city. He refused to leave them and declared that he would go into the streets himself. Cayenne protested that his son was still a student and the royal bloodline depended on his survival. But Yoel knew every servant had loved ones below, and he believed his magic could save them. He entered a city of shattered houses, injured civilians, and Pelisian troops roaming freely through the flames. Nearby, two invaders pinned a helpless woman between them and seized her arms. Laughing, they called plunder the sweetest reward of war and claimed Veld had given them permission to take anything. A grim chant interrupted them, demanding that their unending breath be offered to the king. When the voice called for flowing blood as well, the soldiers realized a new enemy had appeared. Yoel seized the rhythm of distant heartbeats and transformed it into controlled fire. His fifth-tier spell, Flame Burst. Blazing dust exploded through the alley in a roaring torrent. The survivors recognized their prince and stared in awe at a 15-year-old capable of fifth-tier magic. Taking his place between the civilians and their attackers, Yoel swore no soldier would pass him. The invaders watched in disbelief as their own assault vanished inside his overwhelming flames. Yet by then, destruction had already reached the royal courtyard, where fire and Pelisian troops surrounded the castle. At the center of the courtyard, Veld demanded that the captured king reveal where his son had gone. Beside him, an eye-patched officer held a blade against Cayenne and mockingly urged his majesty to answer. Yoel burst into the courtyard to find both of his parents restrained by enemy soldiers. Seeing the blade poised to fall, he screamed for them to stop. The officer calmly informed Veld that Mainu's missing prince had finally arrived. Only then did Yoel realize that the long-haired commander before him was the man behind the invasion. It was Emperor Veld Palicia, and his icy gaze lived up to every dreadful rumor. Cayenne shouted for his son to run, warning that Yoel had been Palicia's true target all along. The instant the prince hesitated, Gates Belgut plunged a knife into the king's shoulder. Yoel formed an intricate defensive circle and lunged toward his father. The attack drew only the faintest reaction from Veld's glowing golden eye. With a single swing, the Emperor's sword tore straight through the blazing spell formation. The shattered magic hurled Yoel backward, stunning him. He had never seen steel cut through a magic circle. Veld acknowledged his chantless casting, but said the prince's inexhaustible mana was the only gift he cared about. Gates drove the knife deeper and warned that every act of resistance would extend Cayenne's agony. Unable to endure their cruelty, Yoel begged them to stop. He dropped to his knees and promised to surrender peacefully if his family was spared. The moment he yielded, specially made shackles snapped shut and sealed his magic. Powerless, Yoel repeated his plea for his father and the others to be released. Veld ignored him, placed the captive in Belgut's custody, and ordered the prince transported away. As soon as the emperor departed, Gates commanded his men to kill every man and take the women alive. Yoel stared at him in horror, unable to understand why his surrender had changed nothing. Gates made sure the shackled prince remained there to witness the massacre unfold. Screams filled the courtyard as Yoel fought his restraints and begged the soldiers to stop. Mortally wounded, Cayenne called his son's name one final time. Another blade flashed, and blood sprayed across the terrified prisoners. Felicia watched helplessly as her husband's blood spread over the stones at her feet. Overcome by grief, Yoel swore he would kill every last person responsible. Gates laughed, seized the queen by her hair, and challenged the restrained prince to save her. Yoel charged with a broken scream, despite the shackles and the loss of his magic. Cayenne moved first, sinking his teeth into the officer's ear in a final attempt to protect his wife and son. Cursing furiously, Gates knocked the wounded king aside with a savage blow. Pelisian troops dragged Yoel away, and before his eyes, his family and the kingdom of Mainu were erased. In the underground prison, he eventually lost all sense of how long he had been held. With no day or night and the extraction machine never stopping, every passing second became torture. His screams left the taste of blood in his throat, while the rest of his body went numb. Yoel tormented himself with the belief that greater power might have saved his family. Perhaps obeying his father's command could at least have prevented Cayenne's death. Perhaps Felicia might even have escaped Belgut if Yoel had fled in time. Yet his guilt always returned to the same conclusion. With enough strength, he could have saved them both. Tears ran down his face as he cursed the weakness of the boy he used to be. The guards merely mocked the weeping Prince of Calamity and complained that his mana output was falling. One of them increased the machine's power as casually as if he were adjusting ordinary equipment. Electricity ripped through Yoel again, and he wondered how much longer his body could survive. As his strength ebbed away, he questioned what became of a person once their mana was completely exhausted. His extraordinary perception had always allowed him to see mana in a way other mages could not. Now the dwindling stream before his eyes revealed that even his supposedly infinite reserves were nearly gone. The last of that energy condensed into a small orb, and his fear gave way to sudden understanding. Inside its fading glow, he could make out the unmistakable shape of a human soul. Mana was not simply fuel for magic, it was life itself, flowing from the soul. Under the machine's relentless pull, the sphere cracked like fragile glass. The flow stopped completely, and the startled guards concluded that their prisoner was dead. Yoel hung lifeless in the apparatus, showing neither breath nor pulse. In the silence beyond death, a distant voice called his name. A colossal shining doorway appeared within the cathedral, unseen by every guard around him. The voice ordered Yoel to open his eyes and proclaimed that he had been chosen as a hero. A silver mechanical being stepped through the light and welcomed him to Avalon's gate. Yoel remembered the gate from his childhood book and asked if those ancient stories had been true. The impossible doorway floating above the prison seemed to provide its own answer. Its guide announced that the newly chosen hero had earned an eternal place in Avalon. A luminous hand reached for him as he struggled to grasp what was happening. The open gate offered escape from his ruined body and an end to all his suffering. Freed from physical chains, Yoel raised the translucent hand of his spirit toward it. Below, the oblivious guards celebrated his death and the reward they expected from the Emperor. His soul began rising, but guilt stopped him just before he touched the guide's fingers. Everyone he loved had died because of him. How could he accept peace as the only survivor? Yoel apologized to Noelle, ashamed that the brother she trusted was about to abandon his final promise. Then a precious memory returned, Noelle eagerly asking him to judge her new academy uniform. She had proudly shown him the clothes she would wear at Safar Academy. That morning, she had declared with a radiant smile that she loved her entire family. Before leaving, she had thanked them for indulging the dream she called selfish. The memory pulled Yoel back, and he rejected Avalon's verdict. Noel had believed he would protect her, and as long as she might still be alive, that promise was not fulfilled. He grabbed the guide's offered hand, not to enter Avalon, but to force his way back and save his sister. The guide ordered Yoel Mainu to cross the threshold and submit to Avalon's claim. Instead, Yoel tried to cast Blazing Inferno, hoping to shatter its control with raw power. The crimson light in his palm flickered out before the spell could take shape. Without a living body, his spirit could no longer produce the mana required for magic. The guide explained that Avalon had granted him entry, not the right to refuse it. Yoel answered that Noel had no other protector, and he would not surrender that duty. One conviction overwhelmed everything else. He was not allowed to die here. The machine-faced guide replied that the choice had never belonged to him. Ghostly hands closed around Yoel's arms and legs, dragging his spirit toward the gate. Remembering that mana was born in the abyss of the soul, he reshaped his spiritual form and tore himself free. The guide warned coldly that he had entered a realm never meant for him. Yoel refused to let Avalon determine where his existence would end. Neither machine hero nor destiny itself would make that decision in his place. He surged forward, and the spectral restraints recoiled beneath the force of his will. More hands reached from every direction, but Yoel steadied his new form and continued to resist. Beyond the threshold, legendary souls watched in amazement as a newborn spirit moved entirely on its own. Their voices drifted out of Avalon, revealing that the struggle had an audience. Amid the commotion, Yoel heard a familiar name from the heroic tales of his childhood. Someone called Halberd the Swordmaster, confirming that the legends themselves stood behind the gate. He also recognized Lady Faye, the Swift Thunder, while Halberd proudly noted that the newcomer knew his name. Yoel stared through the doorway and demanded to know whether those celebrated heroes were truly there. Faye warned him that his time was ending, and fate would soon drag him inside. Even history's mightiest champions had eventually died. None of them had escaped destiny. The guide announced that Yoel's final moment had arrived and warned him to stop resisting. If he continued to defy Avalon, the only road left to him would lead to hell. Countless translucent hands surged around the prince and pulled him toward the threshold. But the threat of damnation meant nothing, while his unfinished promise still tied him to life. The thought of Noel waiting for him gave Yoel the strength to rip free of Avalon's grasp. To the astonishment of every legend watching, he forced Avalon's gate to close against its own will. Before the stunned heroes vanished, Yoel turned and issued a reckless challenge. Was there anyone in Avalon brave enough to walk through hell at his side? Even Halberd called the demand impossible, while the others dismissed Yoel as a madman. Their reaction taught him that legendary heroes were no different from anyone else. Beneath their glorious names, they were still ordinary people who feared an impossible path. Yoel offered them a bargain. Give him their power, and he would return them to the world of the living. Faye scoffed at the fantasy, and another hero insisted their fated stories had already ended. The legends began to turn away, until an unfamiliar laugh echoed through Avalon. Unable to see its owner, Yoel demanded to know who had answered him. The unseen hero accepted the wager, saying this adventure might finally fulfill a lifelong desire. Before Yoel could reply, Avalon's ghostly hands crashed together around his exposed soul. Pale currents pierced through him, sealing the mysterious agreement within his spirit. The great gate faded, leaving his outstretched hand suspended in darkness. There, Yoel promised Noel that her brother would come back for her, whatever the cost. In the cathedral, the guards casually discussed what to do with the prisoner's corpse. One asked the captain for instructions while another prodded the motionless body. Annoyed by the extra work, they decided to throw him onto a wagon and be done with it. Then the supposedly dead prince rose beneath the glowing crystal, half of his hair now white. One guard approached to force him back into position, treating his revival as a minor nuisance. Yoelful snatched the man's sword and cut him down before anyone could react. The remaining soldiers froze. An unarmed prisoner had just moved faster than a trained guard. Studying the bloody sword, Yoel remarked with chilling calm that its edge was terribly dull. He told the others to stop wasting his time and felled 2 more soldiers in a single sweep. The spray of blood fills him with a disturbing thrill, as if another warrior's hunger has awakened inside him. A voice urges him to keep cutting, eager to see both enemy blood and his own spill across the floor. Panic spreads among the guards. Their captive was a mage, not a swordsman. Yoel walks through the fallen until one terrified survivor demands to know who he really is. A second presence answers from within, introducing himself as captain of the Shinsengumi's first unit. The laughing warrior is Okita Soji, the hero who accepted Yoel's impossible bargain. Throughout the underground cathedral, wounded guards recoil from their transformed prisoner. Okita's spectral form overlaps Yoel's body, guiding the stolen sword with effortless skill. When Yoel speaks the swordsman's name aloud, his enemies assume death has driven him insane. He laughs with them and admits that perhaps some part of his mind truly has broken. The commotion draws reinforcements down the stairs, and they are stunned to find the dead captive standing. Yoel welcomes the familiar tension of battle and challenges the newcomers to amuse him. But Okita's borrowed strength floods into a body ruined by years of mana extraction. Pain grips Yoel's chest. He drops to one knee and the sword tumbles from his hand. The agony he tears out a scream before his consciousness disappears. Blinding light gives way to a peaceful garden where unfamiliar warriors sit together drinking tea. Yoel awakens among them, unable to understand how this sanctuary replaced the bloody cathedral. A long-haired warrior explains that this is the inviolable seat of Yoel's soul, now occupied by the heroes he absorbed. The prince recognizes the speaker as Matsunaga Danjo, another figure from the legends he once read. Matsunaga Danjo Hisahide confirms it, proudly recalling his reputation as a rebel and collector of fine tea utensils. Among the gathering is Joan of Arc, the Holy Maiden of Orleans, said to have been forsaken by God. Beside her stand revolutionary Che Guevara and Robin Hood, Sherwood's guardian, also known as Hereward the Wake. Cleopatra, the beautiful Viper Queen, lounges nearby and appraises their unexpected host. Simon Magus, notorious as the father of heresy, sits masked and silent at the table. Okita crosses the garden toward Yoel, removing any doubt about who these strangers are. The self-proclaimed genius in light blue casually asks whether his new host has finally awakened. Yoel admits that, hero or not, every person before him is a complete stranger. Che says they came from a world named Earth and know just as little about Ceresia. Yoel realizes Avalon's Gate gathers champions from different worlds, centuries, and even moral codes. He immediately invokes their deal and demands the power they promised him in exchange for restoring their lives. Matsunaga, Joan, Robin, and Che reject him without the slightest hesitation. Simon, Cleopatra, and the others refuse as well, leaving the prince dumbfounded. For a long moment, Yoel cannot understand why every supposed ally has abandoned their agreement. Joan repeats its exact terms. First, he returns them to life, then they lend him their strength. Robin adds that if Yoel breaks his promise, none of them will owe him anything. Okita finds the idea of taking over the prince's body amusing, though even he sees where it would lead. The heroes would tear one another apart for permanent control of their shared vessel. Robin tells the top-knotted killer to silence himself before his enthusiasm causes trouble. Okita reaches for his sword anyway, curious to discover what violence is possible in this place. He learns that absorbed heroes cannot harm one another within the seat of the soul. Simon explains that assimilation ties all of them to their host, so any wound dealt to Yoel harms them too. If the prince dies again before fulfilling his part of the bargain, every soul inside him will be erased forever, losing even the afterlife Avalon once promised. Joan observes that such an ending would simply complete the deaths they have already suffered. Silence settles over the garden as each legend considers the threat of total extinction. Yoel changes his approach and asks what they would truly want from a second life. Every gaze sharpens. Death has done nothing to extinguish their old ambitions. Matsunaga desires every beautiful object said to possess a soul, an appetite he calls pure aestheticism. Joan seeks salvation for the weak, by destroying weakness so completely that nothing of it remains. Che dreams of a revolution powerful enough to drag an entire world into violent transformation. Robin wants only an undisturbed forest and the peace to live there alone. Cleopatra craves pleasure without limits, searching for a sensation beyond anything she has known. Simon pursues perfect knowledge, hungering for every new truth with almost divine greed. Okita asks for a worthy battlefield and the chance to earn a satisfying death in combat. Once they finish, Yoel asks whether a real path back to life would make them reconsider. Matsunaga studies the boy, sensing another dangerous plan behind his calm expression. The others gather around the table and demand to hear exactly what he intends to do. Okita agrees first, delighted by any possibility more exciting than eternal idleness in the garden. Then he points out the immediate problem. Yoela's conscious body is still surrounded by Imperial soldiers. Rising with new resolve, the prince says there is one spell he wants to try. Back in the cathedral, blue light begins gathering around the kneeling prisoner. Yoel opens his eyes with a quiet smile, already certain that his experiment worked. Words of dusk and dawn, earth and sky, and form born from chaos rise instinctively to his lips. A radiant magic circle spreads beneath him as hero manifestation takes shape. Okita Soji is drawn from the seat of the soul and given a physical body at Yoel's side. The swordsman marvels at his freedom while the guards demand to know who he is and where he came from. Yoel offers no explanation. He simply orders Okita to kill his enemies. Okita obeys with pleasure, severing the nearest soldier before the man can raise his weapon. Then he faces the remaining troops and politely invites the next opponent to step forward. Several armored men surround him, trusting that sheer numbers will crush the impossible intruder. Their shaken companions cannot understand how a stranger appeared inside the sealed cathedral. Yoel can only say that the spell came to him despite never being taught. Magic circles and incantations have always emerged through instinct rather than study. Okita immediately recognizes this effortless command as the mark of genuine genius. Furious at being ignored, an impatient soldier attacks in the middle of their conversation. Okita catches the descending blade almost lazily and tells the man he is far too slow. He slips around the desperate follow-up, exposing a perfect gap in the soldier's defense. One flash of steel removes the man's head before any of his comrades can intervene. With blood on his cheek, Okita decides Avalon's choice of Yoel could not have been an accident. The survivors fall back, unable to comprehend how quickly their assault collapsed. A furious shout cuts through their panic and demands to know why they have stopped fighting. A heavily armored officer strides forward, towering over Okita with brutal confidence. The swordsman smiles at the newcomer, pleased to have finally found someone worth testing. Yoil watches from nearby, prepared for whatever strength the Empire reveals next. The giant humiliates his frightened men until they apologize for disgracing the Imperial army. Unconcerned, Okita asks the brute to offer him at least a little entertainment. The officer sneers and dismisses the smaller warrior as worthless trash. His spiked club crashes down, demolishing the stone floor where Okita stood an instant earlier. Okita slips clear with a laugh, exhilarated by the raw strength of the blow. Another massive swing follows, but he glides around its momentum with ease. During the fight, Okita glances back and notices a blue thread linking him to his summoner. Curious, he moves farther away until the magical tether pulls taut. The test shows that his manifested body cannot travel more than roughly 20 feet from Yoil. Seeing an opening, the officer attacks from behind and roars for Okita to face him. The swordsman whirls around, meeting the club with his blade and refusing to yield an inch. Steam pours from the armored man as disbelief wipes away his confidence. His strained taunts cannot conceal the fear of seeing that monstrous blow stopped. Okita is surprised as well. An ordinary suit of armor should have split apart under his strike. The mystery excites him, and crackling power begins to gather around his body. The officer raises his club and declares that any further struggle is useless. Okita responds with a single perfect cut through reinforced armor and the flesh beneath it. The soldiers recognize their platoon commander and stare in horror at the wound. His smile fading, Okita studies the result before turning to the remaining men. Blue energy rises around him as he offers to send every comrade to the grave together. Before he can move, the injured commander grabs Yoil and places a blade against his throat. Laughing at his chance, the man orders Okita to drop his weapon or watch the prince die. Yoil apologizes for being caught, but Okita only smiles and tells him there is no problem. Ignoring the frantic threat, the swordsman charges and says his decision has already been made. His blade opens the commander's unprotected neck as Okita vows never to lose another comrade. Blood pours from the man's mouth, and his hostage ploy ends with his own death. Once freed, Yoil finally comprehends the staggering scale of Okita's skill. Yet through their bond, he senses that another force is contributing to that strength. The surviving guards abandon their commander and flee to report the disaster to General Gates. Okita leaps after them, unwilling to let a single enemy escape. A sudden warning through the bond stops him before he can finish the pursuit. Behind him, Yoil bends double and coughs up blood. Okita turns at once, his murderous momentum broken by concern for their shared condition. Their awareness retreats into the tranquil inner garden, suspending the battle outside. There, Okita examines his host and admits that manifestation is placing an enormous strain on him. Yoil says normal magic is bearable, but a hero's borrowed power burns through him like molten rock. Even so, Okita is astonished that a battered novice can control such an unfamiliar technique at all. Yoil praises the swordsman's strength, but Okita insists that greater warriors exist and he still has much to learn. Then he quietly calls Yoil one of his comrades, transforming the nature of their bargain. So long as the prince never betrays him, Okita promises to guard his back. Yoil accepts the condition and asks only that his first new ally never abandon him. Before their brief rest ends, the prince remembers one final obligation. He bows deeply and gives heartfelt thanks to the man who saved his life. Okita replies with a gentle smile, sealing their uneasy partnership without another word. Later, Yoil leaves the hidden imperial church alone beneath a ragged traveler's cloak. A tremendous explosion swallows the entrance behind him, burying the prison in fire and rubble. Walking through the heat, he reflects on meeting a hero born in an entirely different world. That impossible encounter may be precisely the advantage he needs to survive. For the task ahead, an audacious outsider untouched by Xerasia's common sense could be invaluable. Under the burning sky, Yoil tells Noelle to wait and promises that her brother will protect her. That vow, hardened by all he has lost, is the reason he returned from death. His escape leads him toward Keeper, a frontier town still under Imperial control. Once famous for its hot springs, Kepler had drawn travelers from across the region, but 2 years of occupation replaced its visitors with Pelisian soldiers. The thriving resort has become an impoverished shell, its exhausted residents barely surviving. Yoil stumbles through the ruined streets, wondering how long the Empire held him as his body begins to fail. He forces himself onward, knowing he cannot rescue Noelle until he recovers his strength. A fruit vendor mistakes him for a customer, then grudgingly answers his strange question about the date. It is the year 1321 of the Baldia calendar. 5 entire years have vanished from Yoil's life. Irritated that the ragged stranger is blocking business, the merchant kicks him into the street. Curled on the stones, Yoil whispers Noelle's name and prays that she survived. Not far away, Imperial soldiers proclaim the town a place for humans as they torment a hidden captive. Their victim is a wounded beastkin woman, trapped on the ground by 3 armored men. One kicks her and promises his companions they will teach the beast to obey. As they pin her down, the soldiers openly speculate about what a noble buyer might pay. Feline ears and a tail reveal the injured woman's beastkin heritage. Their leader suggests inspecting the merchandise before the sale, denying her even basic personhood. Blood runs from her mouth as she recoils and warns the approaching soldier away. He merely grins, confident that injury and numbers have made resistance impossible. Then a cloaked figure appears behind them and coldly asks who they are. Barely able to stand, Yoil confronts all 3 with unwavering focus. He presses his palms together and reaches into his soul with hero summoning. Green light light spreads across the alley as Robin Hood returns to the physical world. The legendary archer marvels at being alive, but Yoil asks him to lend his strength before celebrating. The soldiers demand explanations, unaware that the balance of power has already shifted. Robin raises one finger and quietly commands the men to be silent. Yoil apologizes for summoning him so abruptly, explaining that he could not abandon the wounded woman. Mistaking exhaustion for weakness, an enraged soldier threatens to kill the meddling stranger. Robin's glowing arrow pierces him before the threat can become action. The outlaw knocks another shaft and calmly invites anyone else to resist. He admits that he does not dislike the compassion that makes his summoner so hopelessly reckless. A second soldier charges with his sword raised, accusing them both of defying Policia. Another arrow flashes past too quickly to track and slices the man's cheek. Unable even to see Robin release the shot, the attacker freezes as a new arrow meets the string. The archer promises that the next one will not miss, leaving the choice of survival to them. The remaining soldiers flee, shouting that their mysterious enemies will regret humiliating the Empire. With the alley safe, Robin celebrates his resurrection and demands time to enjoy being alive. His manifested body begins dissolving almost at once, ending that celebration with cruel speed. At the same time, Yoil collapses onto the stones and struggles to stay conscious. He reaches forward with his last strength, repeating that he still has to find Noel. The rescued beastkin watches in shock, torn between fear of the stranger and concern for him. His vision closes in, and after one final curse, darkness takes him. Far away, the imperial capital of Grand Mastle rises beneath the night in rings of fortified walls. At its center, the frozen towers of the immortal castle dominate every district. Deep inside, an audience chamber lies beneath cold blue light and the gaze of stone guardians. Emperor Veld sits alone on the distant throne, his golden eye hardened by unwelcome news. 3 commanders kneel below, each differently armed but equally cautious beneath his stare. They are Policia's Council of 3 generals, the Empire's highest military authorities. Bubazil Gazelle, commander of the 1st Legion and known as Fly, finishes delivering his report. Veld listens without expression, letting the silence itself press down on the chamber. Fly apologizes for the stalemate and admits that his forces have achieved no meaningful victories. Manhwa Chu of the 2nd Legion, called Scorpion, eagerly offers her assistance at the front. Fly refuses, reminding her that the Emperor has already assigned her another vital command. She leans closer and teasingly calls him by name, unsettling the disciplined general. Bubazil protests that they are standing before their sovereign, while Scorpion laughs at his innocence. Gates Belgut, 3rd Legion commander and the general called Monkey, mocks Fly's failures and boasts of his own speed. From his throne, Veld watches their rivalry without the slightest trace of amusement. Fly reminds Monkey that he was entrusted with guarding the infamous Prince of Calamity. Gates dismisses Yoil as his master's pet and boasts that his legion will one day surpass them all. Their bickering ends when soldiers rush into the chamber with an urgent report from the underground church. An explosion has destroyed the facility, and the feared Calamity has escaped. Gates's arrogance vanishes, replaced in an instant by disbelief. The Emperor speaks a single title, Monkey, and the menace in his voice silences the room. Sweating beneath Veld's stare, Gates turns immediately toward the throne. The other generals bow lower, all traces of their earlier playfulness gone. Veld places the escaped prisoner under Monkey's jurisdiction, and the shaken commander accepts without protest. The Emperor orders Gates to explain himself, and the general's confidence collapses beneath the quiet command. Veld is the dreaded sword saint, and murderous pressure rolls from him across the chamber. Gates manages only a stammered apology, knowing his master has never been generous with mercy. Veld condemns everyone responsible for the escape and orders them all beheaded. Their families will share the punishment, he adds, drawing his enormous sword to underline the threat. Before Monkey can retreat, a glowing circle locks around him. An invisible force smashes the terrified general face first into the floor, leaving his features bloodied. The Emperor calls the disaster Monkey's personal failure and rejects every excuse before it can be spoken. Crushed beneath that power, Gates gasps out a plea for forgiveness. When asked how he will atone, he vows to mobilize the entire 3rd Legion and recover Yoil within 3 days. The Sword Saint lifts his weapon, finally allowing the kneeling general to breathe. Gates recoils as the magic fades, unsure whether his promise has actually saved him. Veld accepts on one condition: the Prince of Calamity must be brought back alive. Another failure, he warns, will receive no forgiveness at all. As the Emperor departs, Gates crawls forward, humiliated, bleeding, and desperate to obey. His trembling hand drags across the stone as the audience chamber fades away. White light washes over everything and carries awareness to a different place. Cleopatra and another hero lean over Yoil as his eyes begin to open. Okita trains nearby while Robin and Shay relax together, proof that this is no ordinary dream. Yoil sits up beside their long table and recognizes the inviolable Seat of Souls. He immediately demands to know what happened to the wounded beastkin woman. The hero facing him admits that no one knows, offering little comfort. Matsunaga considers her fate irrelevant beside the success of hero manifestation. Cleopatra agrees. Even a temporary body proves Yoil can pull the dead back from the underworld. She claims the next turn and playfully suggests that good cooperation might earn him a kiss. Simon interrupts another hero objects, and the proposed reward sparks a noisy quarrel. Matsunaga and Cleopatra bristle at Simon's weary sigh and demand to know what troubles him. The sorcerer warns that a new manifestation would last only seconds, just as Robin's did. He asks Yoel to confirm it and adds that another summoning may not work at all. Cleopatra assumes simple healing will fix the problem, but Simon says the damage lies in their host's soul. 7 heroic spirits are pressing against the same fractured vessel, and those cracks will eventually break it apart. If the soul recovers, however, each hero could remain longer and wield much more of their true power. Cleopatra urges Yoel to heal quickly, until Matsunaga asks whether his original magic will return as well. Simon says no. Manifestation comes from assimilation, but Yoel's damaged soul can no longer generate mana. The loss silences the prince. His endless magical reserves once defined his entire existence. Matsunaga then asks how Simon knows so much about magic when both of them came from Earth. The masked hero identifies himself as a sorcerer of Samaria, making such knowledge only natural. Beyond Avalon's Gate, he spent an immeasurable age studying souls without interruption. It felt like centuries, perhaps millennia, even as the world of the living continued onward. Yoel lowers his gaze. That unimaginable span matters less than the danger directly before him. With or without magic, protecting Noel remains his purpose, and he asks the heroes for their strength. Joan calls the request shamelessly convenient, chilling the entire gathering with her contempt. How does he expect to protect anyone, she asks, when he possesses no strength of his own? Then she flatly refuses to lend him hers, surprising Yoel with the severity of her answer. Joan points to the Beastkin woman and declares that he should have left her to die. Saving the weak is meaningless, she says, because helpless people inevitably become beasts. Joan is still haunted by Rouen and the square where France condemned her to burn. She had fought for God, her country, and the vulnerable citizens who later betrayed her. Bound to the stake, she received their flames instead of their gratitude. Through the smoke, the crowd called her a witch and pelted her with stones. That execution convinced Joan that weakness was an incurable disease within humanity. From then on, she believed the only true salvation for the weak was death by her hand. Until Yoel accepts that creed, she will never permit him to use her power. He asks whether she would truly abandon an injured woman without a second thought. Joan replies that his compassion already contributed to his parents' deaths when Mainu fell. If he repeats the same mistake, his reckless mercy may cost Noelle her life as well. The accusation only hardens Yoel's determination, and he swears his sister will survive. Unmoved, Joan tells him to consider every consequence before he acts. She walks away from the table, leaving her warning over the silent garden. Yoel remains seated among the heroes, forced to contemplate the price of one more mistake. Night settles over a modest timber house somewhere in the impoverished frontier town. Back in his battered body, the fallen prince opens his eyes beneath pale blue light. He finds himself in an unfamiliar room and wonders who brought him there. A quiet sound draws his attention to the Beastkin woman sleeping against his chest. Yoel freezes when he realizes they share a bed and her hand is wrapped around his. His movement wakes her and one golden eye opens with immediate caution. The moment she sees him conscious, relief overcomes her and she pulls him into a fierce embrace. She thanks Providence through tears while Yoel struggles to understand such an emotional welcome. Still startled by a stranger's concern, he asks why she is crying. Rather than answer, she holds him tighter and repeats her gratitude. Her unguarded relief leaves him speechless, but its warmth slowly dissolves his suspicion. At last, a tired smile crosses his face. Somehow, both of them survived. She explains that he collapsed after rescuing her, and Yoel finally asks why they were in the same bed. With no spare blanket, she used the warmth of her own body to stop his violent shaking. Yoel bows sincerely, recognizing that her care may be the reason he is alive. His respect catches her off guard and briefly disrupts the closeness between them. The woman introduces herself as Chia and asks why a stranger risked his life for hers. Yoel gives the simplest answer. Imperial soldiers were hurting her, and that was reason enough. Noticing his countless wounds, Chia asks whether Policia inflicted those as well. He admits that the Empire imprisoned him for 5 years before he escaped. Its forces also murdered both of his parents, a confession that leaves Chia stunned. Despite his condition, Yoel starts dressing and says he must reach Rada before Noel is endangered. Once his sister is safe, he intends to destroy the Empire. Chia questions whether his broken body can survive the trip, but he insists there is no time. Veld knows about Noel, and Yoel vows to defeat anyone the Emperor sends after her. Hearing his plan, Chia offers him one possible way to recover. A certain method, she claims, could heal his body completely. The beast can guard a secret spring called the Fountain of the Gathered Moon. Its strange name gives Yoel pause, but desperation will not let him dismiss the possibility. Chia says its waters can restore even wounds severe enough to threaten a person's life. Spirit energy fills the hidden spring and heals rapidly, but entry is reserved for chosen beastkin. Since Chia herself is forbidden to enter, Yoel asks if revealing it will place her in danger. Her hesitation shows just how serious the prohibition is. Even so, she forces a nervous smile and insists that everything will be fine. Before Yoel can challenge the lie, marching boots outside announce the arrival of a search party. He silences Chia and pulls them both beneath the window as Imperial troops fill the street. An officer orders every house searched for a beastkin girl and a dangerous archer. Another soldier mentions a ragged man, confirming that the patrol is hunting all three figures from the alley. Chia suddenly rises, and Yoil demands to know what she is doing. She plans to draw the soldiers away so he can escape, but he refuses to allow it. Chia accepts the risk, explaining that beastkin never forget a debt to someone who saved them. At the door, she finally gives her full name, Chiha Abasin, and asks for his. He answers only Yoru, hiding the royal identity that would make his capture certain. The patrol approaches their weathered house, forcing the two fugitives to act quickly. Its leader scolds the distracted men and warns that General Gates is coming to crush the resistance himself. Orders have gone out to seal every border after officials identified an escapee from the destroyed facility. Only after the search party moves on do Yoru and Chia release the breaths they were holding. She praises his composure, but he sinks to the floor, weakened by even that narrow escape. When Chia checks on him, Yoru urgently asks one favor. He needs to reach the Fountain of the Gathered Moon before the Imperial net closes. Chia realizes that he must be the escaped prisoner the soldiers were discussing. Yoru confirms that he must cross the border and continue to Rada before it is sealed. After weighing the danger, she meets his urgency with a small smile of understanding. Her choice is made, despite every sacred law she is about to break. Chiha tells him to follow and leads the way toward the Forbidden Spring. They enter the moonlit forest where Yoru's wounded body struggles to match her pace. Chiha presses onward, putting distance between them and the troops searching Keeper. Behind her, Yoru recalls that Mainu banned the beastkin trade. Chia is the first of her people he has met. Beastkin possess animal ears and tails, once communed with spirits, and their women command enormous prices from slavers. When Yoru's breathing turns ragged, Chia looks back and offers him a rest. Leaning against a tree, he asks why she would risk visiting human territory at all. Chia sometimes hides her ears to purchase supplies, though hunters make every trip potentially deadly. The spring must be protected because spirits guard it, and only Beastkin know the path to the village. Yoru accepts the explanation and conserves his remaining strength for the journey. No human has ever entered those waters, so even Chiha can only hope they will heal him. She reminds him that the secret must never be shared and urges him onward before they are discovered. When Yoru calls her name, both travelers sense that they are no longer alone. A towering silhouette blocks the dark trail ahead. Back in Keeper, Gates arrives at the weathered house with nervous soldiers at his side. The battered survivor confirms this is where the ragged man and beastkin woman were last seen. Gates says reporting strange events is the bare minimum, especially when his mood is already foul. Then he calls the soldier worthless for surviving while his comrade died. The man begins to mention an archer, but Gates cuts him down before he can explain. The general repeats the description of Yoil's strange companions, wondering where the prisoner found allies. Blood spreads through the street, drawing Gates' attention to what the dead soldier has left behind. A cruel smile returns. The failed report may still have provided something useful. Kneeling in the pool, he forms a sign and commands the blood to run swiftly and reclaim its shape. The crimson liquid trembles and bubbles beneath his fingertips. The troops recognize the work of a rare innate magic, though none can identify its purpose. Gates raises a blood-coated finger to his tongue and tastes the trail to his prey. The sample belongs to a beastkin, giving the hunter precisely what he needs. At his command, the blood stretches over the stones and races out of Keeper. Gates laughs and orders the living trail to lead his unit back to its source. The liquid gathers into a serpent-like tracker and darts toward its distant owner. Deep beyond the occupied town, a hidden village rests between forest and mountain walls. Beastkin villagers surround the arrivals and force the weakened human beneath a crossing of spears. Their furious elder demands to know why the banished Chia brought a human into sacred territory. Even with weapons aimed at Yoru, she insists that he is not cruel. The elder condemns humanity as murderous, divided, and deaf to spirits, while others ask that Chia be hurt. Whispers call her foolish for defending a human and recall the suffering her mother endured. Chiha stiffens beneath their judgment as Yoru watches from the ground. Invoking her banishment, the elder denies them access to the moonlit pools. Chiha bows until her forehead touches the earth and begs him to reconsider. While spears hold Yoru in place, she pleads for permission to let him enter the spring. Outraged that she would humble herself before a human, the elder raises his fist. Yoru moves between them from his knees and shields Chiha from the blow. The elder is startled that a helpless outsider would still dare interfere. Yoru recalls hearing that beastkin were beautiful people who could hear the spirits and asks if the stories were wrong. Whatever their pride says, he sees no difference between their humanity and his own. The elder rejects that equality and declares spirit-blessed beastkin forever separate from humankind. Yoru asks if those truly command them to despise Chia, and calls such guidance worthless if they do. The elder brands the challenge blasphemous and orders the human executed at sunrise. Chia protests, but the villagers insist that anyone who discovers their home must remain imprisoned until death. Her shaken questions go unanswered as the pair are separated and taken away. Behind stone bars, Yoru regrets his reckless insult and wonders whether Chia is safe. Refusing to wait for execution, he forces himself upright and searches for a way out. His weakened body slams against the cage, but the heavy structure does not move. Bound wrists and rigid bars make escape by ordinary strength impossible. With no alternative, Yoru prepares to manifest a hero long enough to destroy the prison. He closes his eyes and concentrates, aware that even a moment of unconsciousness could doom him. Blue power floods the cell as his invocation calls form from twilight and chaos. Okita appears and slices slices through the bars with one broad stroke. The same flashing blade cuts the ropes around Yoru's wrists before the manifestation ends. Freedom exacts price, leaving him breathless among broken wood and severed bindings. Severe pain follows at once, warning that his fractured soul is nearing its limit. Blood pours from Yoru's mouth as borrowed power tears through his failing body. Still gasping, he orders himself forward and attempts to drag his injured leg. His strength disappears completely, sending him face first onto the blood-stained stone. Shia spots the fallen escapee and whispers his borrowed name in alarm. She finds Yoru beyond the shattered cage, barely conscious and unable to stand. With the prison key in her hand, she answers his startled call with a relieved smile. Shia marvels at the wreckage, then apologizes for taking so long to find the key. The guards are gone, so she urges him to flee. Yoru worries that helping him will condemn her too. He calls her his benefactor and promises to help in return, despite his own condition. Shia explains that no other human has shown her gratitude, bowed to her, or even bothered to use her name. Those small acts of respect made her happy, and rescuing him feels like the only honest response. Her sincerity leaves Yoru quietly grateful and ends his attempt to refuse. They escape together, his arm over her shoulders while she supports most of his weight. In the moonlit forest, Chiha asks Yoru to forgive the elder who sentenced him. Then she reveals the truth. The elder is her father. The Empire killed Chiha's mother years ago and left him consumed by hatred. Chiha hates Policia as well, but she refuses to condemn every human for its crimes. The village cast her out for that belief, and she fears even her father despises her. Yoru holds no grudge against a grieving man, earning a bright laugh and heartfelt thanks. Watching Chiha beneath the moon, he knows her compassion was never a mistake. Their secret route ends at a towering wall of roots, sealing the sacred grounds. Chiha recites an ancient phrase and commands the guarded path to open. Like living sentries, the black roots twist apart in answer to her words. The final barrier withdraws, and blue light spills over both travelers. Beyond it lies the radiant spring of moonlit pools, alive with the glow of spirits. Yoru recognizes the ancient sanctuary guarded by generations of beastkin. Asked about its centuries, Chiha explains that every guard is occupied with the unrest in the village. Their paths must separate here, she says, adding that she hopes his endangered sister remains safe. Yoru gives his rescuer a quiet farewell, his weak voice unable to express the depth of his gratitude. Chia cuts the farewell short and orders him into the water while they still have time. Undressed for the spring, Yoru studies the luminous surface and wonders if it can truly heal him. Chia removes her outer garments too, explaining that the ritual requires both of them. Already in the water, Yoru realizes with embarrassment that she plans to join him. Chia clasps her hands and calls upon the Child of the Moon to answer her voice. Blue light surrounds her as she enters, transforming the forbidden sanctuary into an otherworldly vision. She lifts the sacred water toward the moon and asks it to heal the weary, wounded warrior. The ritual takes hold and Yoru's exhausted body slips beneath the glowing surface. From nearby, Chia smiles as the spring begins its silent work. The invocation drains her as well, forcing her to brace against the bank and catch her breath. Then she turns uneasily toward the forest, sensing a disturbance beyond the clearing. An explosion blossoms above the distant village, hurling fire and smoke into the night. Chia's ears snap toward the blast as every trace of calm leaves her face. Her heightened hearing catches villagers screaming for help and begging their attackers to stop. Flames continue climbing over the trees. The hidden settlement is under attack. One fear eclipses all others, and Chia cries out for her father. Leaving Yoru beneath the water, she races toward the screams and spreading fire. By the time she reaches the heights above it, the village has become an inferno. Gates laughs among fleeing families and orders his troops to burn every home. His soldiers praise Blood Surge, the general's innate magic that made the invasion possible. With it, Gates can manipulate blood and track a victim into even the most carefully hidden refuge. Every Imperial soldier knows that Veld and his three generals wield equally terrifying innate powers. Amid the ruins, Chia's father confronts Gates for defiling land by the general turns in surprise, amused that anyone still dares oppose him. Surrounded by an army, the elder nevertheless orders every Imperial invader to leave. Gates' troops close around him with weapons drawn as the village burns behind them. Their commander laughs and asks whether the old beastkin has lost his mind. He explains that Chia's blood led them this far, even though the trail disappeared in the forest. Then Gates mocks beastkin for hiding like cowards, testing the elder's restraint. Ending the exchange, he demands the immediate surrender of the fugitive Yoru Mainu. Chia is wanted as a traitor too, but her father claims to know nothing about either target. Gates finds the denial ridiculous. To him, a beastkin protecting a human makes no sense. The elder laughs back and agrees that defending humanity would indeed be absurd. Cooperating with Policia, however, would be infinitely worse, and he refuses to submit. Gates sighs with boredom and draws his sword. A single slash cuts off the elder's forearm and turns the confrontation into bloodshed. The wounded chief staggers, but even that pain cannot break his defiance. Blood spatters Gates' face, and he calmly admires the punishment he delivered. The elder curses the Empire and repeats that he will reveal nothing. Gates ends the discussion by driving his sword through the old man as the villagers cry out. Barely standing, the dying chief calls his executioner a monster. Gates laughs and throws the insult back at the one he considers a filthy animal. He describes the massacre as routine Imperial cleanup and invites anyone else to challenge him. Before anyone steps forward, a sudden rain of arrows tears down from above. Gates raises his blade and cuts the shafts apart without retreating. Another figure lands among the flames, replacing his amusement with wary curiosity. Chiha faces the human invader and demands to know what he has done. Gates recognizes his beastkin target immediately and treats her as another prize to claim. Then Chiha looks beyond him and finds the father she came to save. The elder lies motionless in his own blood, face down after Gates' final strike. As soldiers surround them, Gates demands Yoru's location and warns that silence will bring worse suffering. He calls the fugitive a living calamity, blames him for Menu's destruction, and then boasts that he caused it. The laughing confession reveals the full truth behind Yoru's suffering. Chia remembers his 5 years in captivity and realizes Policia tortured him after murdering both parents. Shock becomes fury, and she swears that these crimes will never be forgiven. Claws extended, Chia launches herself at Gates before he can reply. Her strike crashes against his sword, but the general absorbs the force without losing his footing. Chia attacks from every angle while Gates' steel intercepts her claws in a rapid circle. Inspired by her resistance, the frightened villagers rally to avenge their chief and defend their home. Beastkin fighters crash into the Imperial ranks, turning panic into combat across the burning streets. Gates watches the uprising with contempt and wonders why his troops are losing control. He advances on Chia again, praising efficiency while ordering his soldiers to kill faster. Forming another sign, he invokes an overflowing double helix and commands the current to break free. A crimson haze spreads around Gates while the fallen lie motionless at his feet. Living threads of blood wrap around beastkin arms and legs, binding the villagers in place. Gates follows with a sword stroke that kills one immobilized fighter. His own troops whisper fearfully that blood can become both weapon and chain in his hands. Irritated by their discussion, the general suddenly calls for their attention. 2 soldiers freeze beneath his glare, now more afraid of Gates than of the battle. He sends them back to the slaughter, warning that their panic makes Policia look weak. The troops obey and cut through the trapped beastkin without hesitation. Gates laughs, urging them to work faster and praising disciplined enthusiasm for killing. Imperial swords descend through the crowd and overwhelm those still protecting one another. As resistance crumbles, the general plants his blade into another fallen villager. Turning back to Chia, he asks if that pathetic stand was the best she could offer. Tears remain in her eyes, but she insists that the fight is not over. Gates mocks her stubbornness and promises to teach her discipline through pain. Chia charges again, vowing never to accept defeat before a man like him. Blood tendrils streak across her path before she can reach their master. The crimson strands close in from every direction and cut off every escape. They coil around her limbs and torso, leaving her helpless inside the restraint. Gates grips Chiha by the throat and blames her defiance for the massacre. He forces her to look at the bodies and claims that every villager died because of her. Chiha stares through gathering tears, unable to answer his deliberate cruelty. Her remaining strength fades, leaving only a broken whisper for everyone she lost. With her resistance gone, Gates announces that it is time to take his personal reward. He seizes her head and threatens further abuse, treating cruelty as something he has earned. Before he can continue, an Imperial soldier runs up and urgently calls his name. The soldier points toward the village entrance, drawing Gates away from his prisoner. A solitary silhouette stands beyond the smoke and ruins. Yoru waits there on his own feet, his body restored enough to confront the hunter. Gates recognizes his former captive and erupts with delight at their reunion after 5 years. Still bound, Chia whispers Yoru's borrowed name with exhausted relief. He does not answer. His cold gaze remains fixed on the general. Behind his arrival lies the sacred spring, empty and shining beneath the moon. Its luminous current sealed his visible wounds and returned movement to his battered limbs. Beneath the moonlit water, Yoru had felt the spring permeate every part of his body. Healing power burst through the pool and filled the secluded clearing with violent blue light. He opened his eyes underwater, unsettled by the ominous strength overflowing inside him. Then an imperial voice beyond the sanctuary boasted that it would kill the man and violate the woman. The distant threat shattered Yoru's calm and turned his thoughts immediately to Chia. Gates had found the village, and Yoru could not wait for the healing to finish. Chia's name rose above every other thought as the danger became clear. Unable to sense her mana nearby, he understood that she had returned to the village alone. There was no time for complete recovery, so he climbed out of the spring. A voice within warned that another reckless decision might destroy every soul they shared. His awareness entered the Seat of Souls, which now resembled a vast cathedral. Joan of Arc called him a hopeless fool, unimpressed by the recovery he had gained. If he died, every absorbed hero would vanish with him, making the rescue dangerously selfish. Yoru insisted the spring had restored him and promised he would not lose consciousness again. Then he asked Joan to save Chia, using the hero's own survival as leverage. Joan recognized the threat in his words, but admitted that she had no wish to help. She desired a second life for one reason alone: to annihilate everyone she considered weak. Their beliefs were fundamentally opposed, so she would not become his partner. Yoru rejected that difference and forced Joan to hear his true purpose. He too intended to annihilate the weak, though the word meant something very different to him. When her soul entered him, the memories that created Joan's hatred came with it. She fell silent, unable to dismiss the painful understanding behind his challenge. The people she protected betrayed her, and her failure became a hatred of weakness madness itself. Yoru asked whether the person she despised most had always been herself. The question shocked Joan and fractured her certainty for the first time. She had failed to save what she treasured, and self-loathing had guided everything since. Yoru admitted that he shared the same weakness, having failed to protect his family. Now he would destroy everyone who created weakness or preyed upon it, ending that injustice forever. Joan asked if he truly meant those words, and Yoru answered by requesting her power again. Together, they could build a world where predators could no longer exploit the vulnerable. He promised to prove his conviction by erasing every injustice that allowed such cruelty to survive. Joan studied him, weighing his determination against the madness of his dream. At last, a restrained laugh escaped her and broke the cathedral's solemn silence. She called Yoru completely insane, but now the accusation carried fascination instead of rejection. He observed that their madness was the same, and Joan finally agreed to lend him her strength. First, however, he would have to prove he possessed the power to make that impossible world real. His awareness returned to the moonlit pool, leaving Joan and the inner cathedral behind. His recovery was incomplete, but the strength already restored would have to suffice. Smoke above the trees marked the village, and Yoru vowed to save Chia. Praying she was still alive, he abandoned the healing waters. In the ruined village, Gates holds Chia as Yoru arrives beside a manifested Joan. One look at the eye patch confirms that his family's murderer truly stands before him again. Joan marvels at being alive, but Yoru orders her to focus on rescuing Chia. He directs her gaze toward Gates and leaves the rest of his command unspoken. This is a man whose evil should never have been allowed to continue. Joan understands at once and accepts her target with a cold smile. She launches forward, driving her enormous lance down at the Imperial general. Gates crosses his blades and stops the point just above his chest. As blood surge gathers around them, he realizes this woman is not the archer from the reports. Crimson tendrils lash across Joan's armor, trying to bury her advance beneath their numbers. She dismisses the assault and says she has no business with a creature like him. Nearby soldiers jeer and tell Gates that he can do whatever he wants with her. Joan calls them beasts and wonders aloud whether that makes their smiling commander the handler. Gates promises that her smile will vanish once she learns how long resistance can be made to last. Imperial soldiers swarm into the fight as walls of fire erupt across the ruins. Another explosion bursts beneath them and throws heat and debris through the darkness. Relying on numbers, troops charge through the inferno with swords raised. Joan vaults over the assault and lands behind them with effortless control. Her confident smile remains unchanged, showing how little danger their charge presented. One furious soldier rushes her from behind and raises his blade for a killing blow. Joan arches backward beneath the weapon, turning his ambush into useless momentum. Still inverted, she clasps her armored hands and asks the Lord for power to smite the weak. Scarlet marks appear over every attacker, condemning them all at once. Joan rises within a pillar of light as luminous weapons gather above the marked soldiers. The holy barrage falls instantly, piercing helmets and dropping the entire formation. Gates stares in disbelief, unable to identify any school of magic capable of such destruction. Joan rejects the word magic and calls the massacre nothing less than the work of God. The descending beams are salvation's light, sent to guide every sinner before her. Through Joan's manifested body, Yoru's borrowed power exceeds anything his enemies imagined. Gates looks over his dead troops and dismisses their end in this ruined village as pathetic. Joan advances and names him as the next soul she will guide to their side. Gates forms a hand seal, releases every restraint upon his body, and claims its full power. Blood surge coils through the fallen soldiers and drains their remains at his command. The corpses shrivel into mummies while warped voices rejoice at continuing to serve their general. A surviving soldier begs him to stop, but Gates calls death another duty owed to Policia. The man's fear becomes horror as he realizes his commander will sacrifice them all. Empowered by stolen blood, Gates boasts that he has finally recovered the fugitive calamity. Jagged crimson armor hardens around his body while his mutilated ear throbs. Yoel rejects that cursed title. Before Chia, he says his name is Yoru. Then he accuses Gates of destroying Mainu and murdering both of his parents. Gates laughs that only a calamity would speak in such a way. Wrapped in stolen blood, he smiles at both opponents and invites them to begin. Flames consume the silent village, and bodies surround the approaching clash. Gates shapes a long crimson spear as torrents of blood spiral around his armor. He surges forward behind the weapon with terrifying speed, aiming straight for the recovering prince. Yoru barely raises a hand before the blood-armored general is already upon him. Gates names the technique Blood Axe, blood-stained spear, and commits everything to the thrust. The weapon descends within a massive current of blood and closes the distance instantly. Too slow to evade, Yoru freezes before the incoming point. Joan intercepts with a sweeping counter, throwing brilliant blue force across the crimson attack. Fragments of rubble and streams of fire tear through the village as both powers pass. The collision detonates for Yoru, but Joan keeps its lethal force away from him. Her cold warning makes one fact clear before Gates can turn his attention again. Joan is his opponent now, and he will not reach Yoru without defeating her. Gates accepts the challenge and swings his blood-forged weapon at her. She catches the sweeping sweeping blow on her lance, meeting crimson force with silver steel. Red and blue energy explode outward as the weapons grind together. Gates whips his spear overhead for another strike, but Joan slips beneath its path. Her huge lance surges upward and smashes into the center of his breastplate. The silver point pierces his crimson armor and sends fresh blood across the glowing impact. Instead of solid resistance, Joan feels her lance sink into liquid. The pierced body collapses into blood as Gates mocks her for thinking she could scratch his true armor. Before Joan can withdraw, concealed blades of blood cut across her side. Twin crimson crescents curve behind her and complete the deceptive counterattack. Safe within his armor, Gates celebrates the success of his feint. Joan presses a bloody hand to her wound and dismisses it as nothing more than a scratch. Then Yoru coughs up blood beside her, revealing that the injury has reached him too. Simon's warning was exact. Every wound suffered by an assimilated hero damages Yoru's soul. If that fractured vessel dies, all 7 spirits bound within it will be erased. Joan realizes that Yoru will break before she does, so she cannot allow another attack to touch her. Gates watches their concern with satisfaction, already sensing a weakness in their bond. Joan admits that perfect evasion is far easier to demand than achieve as the general prepares his finish. He raises a gigantic spear of burning blood, unwilling to keep his emperor waiting any longer. Facing the overwhelming weapon, Joan asks Yoru how they are supposed to survive. Still coughing blood, he says he has a plan and asks whether she will trust him. Beneath Gates's looming armor, the two quickly share their strategy before the attack falls. Joan's narrow smile returns. The dangerous idea sounds entertaining enough to try. She sweeps her colossal lance across the ground and unleashes a wide surge of blue force. The wave demolishes a nearby structure in a violent explosion, filling the battlefield with smoke. Gates laughs at the obvious diversion. Certain such desperation could never deceive him. Overhead, Blood Realm, Purgatorial Spear Fence fills the sky with floating crimson tridents. At his command, the weapons plunge repeatedly into the smoke and skewer the hidden target. A human silhouette emerges from the haze, giving Gates the opening he expected. He charges and drives his trident through the figure before it can flee. The weapon passes across Joan's body, yet her face and posture do not change. With sudden alarm, Gates realizes that his flawless attack struck nothing at all. The false Joan dissolves into wavering blue light, revealing itself as an illusion. Only now does Gates understand that the diversion concealed something he thought impossible. A surviving soldier shouts a warning and directs the general's attention behind him. The real Joan floats at his back, surrounded by serene blue radiance. She prays for divine mercy and asks the Lord to take away Gates' suffering. Golden sigils form around her while holy power concentrates within the enormous lance. A pillar of blue light descends from Joan onto the exposed general. Gates blocks it with his trident, cursing as the force drives him backward. Their powers erupt together while he boasts that the 3rd Legion's general cannot be defeated. His boast turns to panic as both weapon and armor begin to fail. The overwhelming beam tears Gates from the ground and hurls him into the air. An enormous explosion engulfs the village center and sends fire rolling across the valley. Imperial troops stare into the rising smoke and wonder if their general has finally lost. Some call for retreat while refracted light reveals how Yoru's illusion fooled Gates. Wounded but standing, Joan admits that Yoru's instant use of her power impressed her. Through ragged breaths, he says he trusted the Holy Maiden to make the plan work. Even Joan considers his ability to understand and apply divine power at such speed abnormal. Beneath that simple confidence lies a magical talent she now sees as almost limitless. Nearby, Chiha lies unconscious beside her father's motionless body, the blood restraints around her loosened. Yoru kneels, lifts her carefully, and asks if she can hear him. Her golden eyes slowly open and recognize the borrowed name of her rescuer. Then memory returns and fear for her father overwhelms everything else. Chia tears herself from Yoru's support and throws herself beside the elder's bloodied body. Holding him desperately, she begs her father to open his eyes. Her voice continues through the darkness, pleading for any response from the dying man. Chia screams over him while Yoru approaches through the blood-stained ruins. Her unanswered pleas echo between burning homes and the scattered bodies of the villagers. She refuses to accept his silence and repeats the same desperate request through tears. At last, the elder opens one fading eye and whispers his daughter's name. Her voice sounds exactly like her mother's, he says, leaving Chiha stunned. She promises to find treatment, but he tells her that the spirits have already come for him. Chiha gathers him into her arms as he apologizes for years of cruelty. At last, her father admits that his harshness was born from terror of losing her too. Chiha's mother had shared her nature and dreamed that humans and beastkin might coexist. She trusted a citizen of the Empire, only to be betrayed and surrounded by soldiers. The troops killed her before the elder could intervene, leaving him convinced that his strength had failed. Though he had warned her of the danger, he blamed himself for being unable to save her. He knew Chia still cared about humans, but fear would not let him risk his family a second time. Expecting the tragedy to repeat, he tried to force his daughter to hate all humankind. Every rejection and cruel word came from one desperate wish, to protect the child he loved. His failing body convulses, and Chia begs him not to waste his last strength. Instead, the elder reaches for her and asks to see the smile he has missed for years. Chia presses his trembling hand against her cheek and forces warmth through her grief. She gives him the smile he asked for, proving that the gentle daughter he remembered still lives. Her father gazes at that familiar expression in silence. He tells Chia she looks exactly like her mother, whose spirit seems to stand at her side. His hand slips away as he apologizes one last time for failing to protect her. Chia stares down in disbelief, unable to accept the sudden stillness of his body. She catches his fallen hand and pleads for another answer that will never come. Grief finally breaks through, and her scream for her father crosses the ruins. Holding him against her, Chia demands to know why any of this had to happen. Yoru watches from behind and apologizes as the cost of his arrival surrounds him. He believes imperial violence came to the village because he did. For the first time, Yoru wonders whether Policia's hated title truly belongs to him. Still embracing her father, Chia rejects his guilt and insists that none of this is his fault. Her grief finds the real enemy and lays every shattered life at the Empire's feet. Policia took her mother, father, and village. Therefore, Chia claims the right to avenge them. The force of her declaration silences Yoru's attempt to bear every burden alone. Chia rises and asks to join his war against the Empire. Yoru refuses at once, unwilling to let her follow him into such danger. Shocked by his answer, Chia demands to know why he would leave her behind. They may have won today, Yoru says, but Policia's overwhelming power makes her survival unlikely. When Chia accepts even death as the price of revenge, he shouts that no one else is allowed to die. She clenches her fist, struggling to answer the fear beneath his refusal. Yoru asks her to understand, certain that her father would have wanted her somewhere safe. But Chia says her parents and massacred village cannot rest while their killers still live. In her grief, she believes no one else can deliver the revenge they deserve. Yoru calls the idea absurd, but an old conviction has already returned to him. He once believed that only he could protect the little sister left in his care. That responsibility became the reason he refused to die before reaching her. Now he sees the same desperate certainty burning inside Chiha. Yoru tests her resolve once more and warns that he cannot promise she will survive. Chiha does not hesitate. With or without him, she will fight the Empire. Their eyes meet across the ruined village, and Yoru finally says he understands. He extends a hand and asks Chiha to travel with him, making her battle their shared path. Relief softens her face, bringing the first flicker of hope since her father's final breath. Without warning, Chiha throws herself forward and wraps Yoru in an embrace. He freezes in surprise as grief briefly loosens its hold on both of them. Chiha clings with desperate strength while Yoru can only call her name. She thanks him again and again through tears, and he awkwardly asks her to let him breathe. Then Chiha rejects the Empire's label and promises to prove that Yoru is no calamity. Despite the burning village around them, her words draw a faint smile from him. Yoru returns the embrace, accepting both her gratitude and the responsibility of protecting her. Once they separate, Chiha urges him to leave before Imperial reinforcements arrive. Rada remains their destination, and her hidden beastkin trails should conceal them from Policia. Chia rushes away to prepare, leaving Yoru alone among the fading embers. Joan asks whether saving and accepting Chia proves his heart is too soft for revenge. Yoru says that abandoning Chia would be no different from abandoning the broken person he once was. Amused, Joan calls him stranger than any hero living inside his fractured soul. Then her voice turns serious, and she summons Yoru inward because they need to talk. Within the Seat of Souls, a long table stands beneath tranquil trees. Robin sits apart with his bow, watching the gathering through guarded green eyes. Cleopatra reclines in crimson, her relaxed smile hiding whatever judgment lies beneath it. Okita meditates beneath another tree, completing the silent assembly in Yoru's inner realm. Beyond the table, Joan kneels alone and prepares herself for the council. Simon laughs softly, already delighted by everything the battle revealed. Matsunaga notices his pleasure and asks the sorcerer to explain it. A beastkin, a moonlit healing spring, and Gates's blood sorcery offered three wholly unfamiliar mysteries. Simon hungers for exactly that kind of knowledge, making this violent world invaluable to his research. Matsunaga laughs beside him, equally pleased by a realm capable of producing such wonders. Yet he still questions Yoru's reliability, even after the prince overcame Joan's stubborn refusal. Yoru appears inside the garden, and every waiting hero turns toward him. Joan rises from prayer and walks forward with her decision already made. Before she reaches Yoru, Che orders the Holy Maiden to wait. The revolutionary still distrusts the boy, having known too many people whose courage ended with speeches. One young man overthrowing an empire sounds impossible, but Che recognizes the scale of his ambition. That reckless defiance is precisely what makes Yoru's plan worth watching. He gestures toward Joan and challenges anyone unmoved by such fire to examine their own resolve. Then Che lights a cigar and tells the doubters to stay silent and observe. Joan gives him only a measured glance, refusing to let the warning alter her choice. She leaves the table while Che and Matsunaga watch in silence. Reaching Yoru, Joan kneels before him and reverses the hostility that once divided them. She pledges her support, offering even the rage born from confronting her own weakness. From this moment, Joan's fury and strength will become Yoru's weapons against Policia. Che's doubt breaks into a grin. Her conviction has answered his demand for action. The revolutionary rises only to kneel as well and places his own power behind Yoru. One by one, all 7 heroes kneel behind Joan and join her vow. Speaking as souls bound within the same vessel, they acknowledge the prince who unites their fates. Okita, Robin, Simon, Cleopatra, and the others swear to offer every power they possess. Yoru accepts without ceremony and asks only that they move forward together. He names their path honestly, a shared journey through a living hell. The oath echoes through every gathered soul, placing their strength behind the fallen prince. Yoru repeats the invitation as an equal, binding the heroes by choice rather than command. Together, the prince and 7 legends accept the road through hell toward Policia's destruction.